Welcome to her comeback. I'm so glad you're back with me. This is where 50 isn't your finish line. It is your starting point, the starting point of everything you want your life to be, the person that you are meant to be. I'm your host, Michelle Thompson, and we are proving that your best chapter may just be the one you haven't written yet. We'll continue each episode featuring honest conversation with women who have stopped going at it alone and have found their way to fulfillment, joy, and purpose in their second act. You'll hear about their struggles, their breakthroughs, and the practical steps that they took to create lives that they actually love. This podcast will show you how other women have made their comeback and how you can too. Welcome back.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to her comeback. I am so happy to have Dr. Antoinette Kruse with us today. She's such an amazing lady. I had the privilege of meeting her last year and have really gotten to know her over the past few months, and she amazes me. And Dr. Antoinette, welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on. Would you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I am what Floridians call a northerner. My husband and I relocated to Southwest Florida in 2016 from Pennsylvania proper. We lived in Ann Arbor, Rochester, Michigan. I am a first generation doctor. I completed my clinical work at the University of Michigan, taught at Columbia University, and also this is where I really gained a lot of the clinical understanding and the dual diagnosis, understanding how the chronic and the health and wellness go together. And then started outreach work in Michigan.
And on my show here, we talk about women who have recreated their life and had different transformations. And you are certainly a beautiful example of that. So I'm
Wow.
going to ask you just a few questions. And I wanted to talk first about what led you from the traditional clinical social work into this integrated, body centered approach to trauma recovery. Can you talk about that journey a little bit?
Sure. I think what I learned, number one, was understood on a greater level managed care and how managed care drives the quality of care. But I think the other piece that I really learned was that we were just having conversations about symptoms and what people were experiencing, as opposed to really getting to the nitty gritty of what was the cause of the distress or the impairment that was preventing people to really fully live and not just survives. That was, Michelle, the catalyst for, okay, there's got to be something else. There's something that we're not missing here. And then, of course, I had come from the University of Michigan, so I had gained so much knowledge from the understanding of trauma and the impact of traumatic events in the lives of humans. And so that was where this trajectory started. It really started while I was in my clinical studies and really didn't even understand until I landed here in Southwest Florida. And that was when it truly manifested. And what happened was Hurricane Irma hit in 2017. And I experienced Irma, the darkness, power out at night when you couldn't see anything, but you could hear the sounds of this howling wind. Those kinds of things you don't forget. Those are imprints. They leave imprints in the body. And I was still at the time working for one of the larger behavioral health agencies. But I think what was really telling for me was the fact that there was no plan for people who were preparing for a major storm to hit. There was really no, okay, here's the safety plan. What's your safety plan? But more importantly, our agency is closing. There was no plan for people to prepare for care or how they would even care for themselves during the storm. Before the storm, okay, grab the water, grab the propane, grab the batteries. But there was really no mental health preparedness kit. And so that was the piece that really stayed with me. Here's the other piece. So, how did we transition today to the work that we're doing? We started working with individuals experiencing severe and persistent mental health issues. We helped them get connected to disability benefits, which ultimately allowed them to be able to afford housing. We're helping to close the gap here in Lee County as it relates to homelessness. And we know that without housing, the probability of helping a person really become self-sufficient is more challenging. So people need basics: food, shelter, recognition, emotions, emotional care, love, just acceptance. So Hurricane Irma hit. We were seeing people who were just out and about, just really lost. Their neighborhoods, their families dislocated. And as we continued to do our work, we learned a lot about our mental health care system here in Southwest Florida. We learned about what managed care would and would not pay. And at the time, we were 50 out of 50 as far as mental health care spending back at that time frame.
I mean, at the
That's
bottom of the list.
Yeah, the investment in mental health care here in Southwest Florida was really, it just seemed to not be a priority. Even though our county officials were aware of the issues, people were really concerned, it just wasn't making the top of the list. And so we decided, okay, so what can we do to help and support our county is that we would begin to just understand on a greater level. So taking the data that we received who were diagnosed with a mental health concern, really try to understand, okay, what is the core of this trauma? Why do we see this revolving door of symptoms and behaviors? And so what happens is that you see a person who has had a traumatic event in their life. And usually what happens is there's some sort of coping mechanism, whether it be negative, like say alcohol or some sort of substances. So the substance was the primary diagnosis when really the schizophrenia should have been the primary treatment that we were really trying to accomplish with the individual. So oftentimes in the traditional systems, medication is also provided as a way to help with some of the symptoms. But as symptoms do not get to those root causes. And so that was where what I really became concerned about. And I was really focused on vulnerable populations, which are our children and seniors and people with disabilities. So we were really focused in that area. However, when you open your door and you're a nonprofit organization here, you get everything. Everybody comes in because people just need help. They don't know where to go. Fast forward to Hurricane Ian 2022. We had become very active with FEMA, working with the county. We were called into the disaster shelters, the public and the medical, 3 days after the storm, just being there, working side by side with Red Cross. And we learned a lot there as well, being right in the mix of a public response to a major hurricane, Cat 4. And it was really interesting to see that when you talk to people about their experience, really trying to understand, okay, what are the priorities? You're in the shelter, you're dislocated, but the recall is what I kept hearing is, wow, I remember when Andrew hit and Charlie hit, and they kept rewinding and then comparing the other hurricanes to Ian. It was just like, wow, you're seeing this complex trauma now, these cascading effects of experiencing multiple hurricanes. And so we were also designated as a FEMA recovery center where people were coming in to have or receive assistance with their applications so that they could get the dollars to just be able to live, whether it be to find a hotel or to begin to work on repairing the home. So we were grateful to be in that capacity working with FEMA and the American Red Cross. But what we were also seeing too was that people were not really focused on the emotional aspects of their trauma related to the disaster. And so that was where I really thought, okay, we have an opportunity here because all of the data that was being promoted was the structural aspects, the costs, the costs, the costs. During Hurricane Ian, 195,000 people submitted applications for FEMA assistance. And then it took a year before the actual disaster case management program was stood up. so that we could actually begin to do the work with people. It was really incredible, the time frame, but they have to collect data. There's a process in place before they can stand up a lot of these programs. We were able to help over 200 people with housing and repairs and relocation. But the more important piece for us was, how are people going to sustain themselves for the next hurricane? What type of coping, what kind of education, what kind of skills have they learned? And so what we began to do is really look at, how are people who come to us for FEMA application assistance, how are you really living through or handling what you've gone through emotionally? And so we began to talk to people really on the next level. So in addition to the housing assessment, there was another assessment that I brought in to try to understand. And so most people had experienced multiple hurricanes. They have had to start over all over again 3 and 4 times. There was a space that became available for us in the midst of all of what was happening with Hurricane Ian. And we thought, okay, so I had just also completed my yoga teacher training. And it was really exciting because I had all these great skills, especially as it relates to emotional regulation. Because the idea, when you think about yoga, yoga actually means yoke, and to yoke the mind and the body, and to bring a place of centeredness in. And so I learned a lot of great skills for my own well-being. And I'm thinking, hey, this is another great tool in the toolbox. So one day during our Hurricane Ian support groups, which we developed because so many people were in need of just an emotional place, a safe place that they could come and just sit and feel like, hey, these people here have something in common with me. I don't have people judging me about what I am or am not doing. There was a place for people to come and fellowship and have food and just feel like they were among others who had something in common. So one day I just decided that I would bring in some breath work, some simple breath work. And that is what started this work, Michelle, because what happened was, right after that, we eventually did experience some funding changes. Things changed because we had a new president administration. And then so we were in that crossfire where, wow, what are we going to do now? But the cool thing about coming back is, we had already started to pivot. I had this idea in my heart that said, we need to provide something else, something extra for people in this community where we're all geographically vulnerable to climate and the increasing frequency of disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes. We have to give people something more, and we have to help people understand how to bounce back and bounce back stronger. Because what I understand now is that when you have a plan, fear is negotiable. And so the living laboratory was birthed simply by asking people, helping people, tell us what you need, teach us. And that is how the lab was birthed.
So tell our audience what that is. What is the living laboratory? What is
So
that?
the Mind Body Movement Living Laboratory is just really a place where people can come, understand their trauma, understand how trauma impacts the nervous system. First of all, what is the nervous system? Because oftentimes you're going to physicians, and while they will give you basic information, we really go into the breakdown of, this is your nervous system. You have a parasympathetic, a sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and then rest and digest. And we help people understand that when you continually stay in these hyper aroused states, what happens is the body has an alarm, and it just goes off constantly until we learn how to close down or quiet that alarm, eventually turn that alarm off. And when that alarm is going off in the body continuously, it adds to the concept of disease, dis-ease. And what happens is, when the body is in a stress state, the organs, all organs begin to shut down. and our system resources, our body system resources become depleted. And again, when we are constantly in stress, so hurricane after hurricane, and we don't figure out how to get into that body and understand that stress and how it's impacting our body, we are ending up in these places that have us diagnosed with cardiovascular disease. We have intestinal disease. We have mental health issues. Here at the laboratory, our goal was to really teach people how to listen to the body. One of the things that I understood during my practice years as a clinician was is that there was this disconnect. I kept hearing people talking about the symptoms and the coping, the counseling and the treatment that was being offered was really, okay, we're just going to keep talking about it. We're going to just keep talking. Hopefully we'll just talk it away. But with the work that we do here at the Living Laboratory is as a yoga instructor, I bring in what's called somatic experiencing, and it's almost like body psychotherapy. And I want to just share clients understand the trauma and what happens in the brain, but their bodies hadn't caught up. And there's a great book by Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps Score. Whenever we experience trauma, our body takes a snapshot and we hold on to that trauma. And then what happens is sometimes trauma can create again this regulated nervous system, which can create neck and back pains, constant headaches, fatigue. It can create conditions like Crohn's, arthritis, and things, inflammation in the body. And oftentimes it is really a aspect of understanding the trauma that has happened to the body, getting to the source of that stress, and then helping people understand through understanding with the mind, connecting the body, and then being able to move to release that trauma. So that is what we do at the Mind Body Movement Living Laboratory.
There's really been quite an evolution with Providence Family Life Center. You talked about how when you moved to Southwest Florida, you saw the gaps that were there from Hurricane Irma in terms of what was available to people that have been traumatized, that had lost property and that kind of thing. And then how you were able to, by the time Ian came, you had organized within Providence Family Life Center in a way that you were able to really fill those gaps that you saw from when you first came down. Maybe as more just an observation of how the Providence Family Life Center evolved from Irma to Ian. At Irma, you were seeing where there were gaps, but then by Ian, you were actually filling those gaps and you were that resource that wasn't there before. And so how amazing that is that you were able to really grow and evolve that way. Now, Providence Family Life Center though actually started back in 2008, right? So can
Yes.
you just take us back in time a little bit? So in 2008 when you founded Providence Family Life, what gap were you trying to fill at that point in time?
Sure. Yeah. I had just come through a really intense life change. And I remember in that life change, I found myself having to actually restart my life at that time. And what happened was is that as I navigated social services and trying to understand how do you get help as a single mom? How do you get help to really get back on your feet, especially if you've worked all your life? I've worked since the age of 14 and never really had public assistance or anything, and I'm not against it at all, but here I found myself in this place. Okay, so what do I do? So essentially there was what we have here, Career Source. Back in Michigan, there was an agency that helped with employment matters and just helping people get back on their feet. And so I had gone through their employment programs just so that I understand, okay, so what do I need to get in this world here and be gainfully employed again? And as I was watching just the interaction with people and the programs that were available, I quickly learned that there were limitations. There was limitations to you couldn't do this if you wanted this service, or you had to do this if you wanted that service. And what I decided to do was I found a job. I was actually detailing cars
Oh,
because it was just like, I'm going to work and I'm going to earn what I need to earn and eventually
Uh-huh.
just move my way right on back up to fully standing on my feet. But education was also part
Wow.
of that. And then also my transition, because I had worked in pharmaceuticals, it was just a whole comeback, Michelle. It was incredible. What happened was while I was in this transition, my heart just really turned to the community. I was front facing to the community. I was seeing women and children coming into this employment agency. And I'm thinking, oh my God, look, here I am. I'm seeing this, but I have a different lens. And my lens is I'm not going to be so reliant on this system because it's creating these barriers for me. It was
Mhm.
uncomfortable. So what I did was is as I said, I'm going to work and I am going to do what I need to do in order to progress and get to the place in my life that I need to. During that time, while I was still just re-engineering my life, I decided that I'm going to help people. I'm going to actually try to find a location to begin to work to help families. And so I found a church that opened their doors, and I decided to start an outreach. And the outreach was to help people that I saw that needed assistance who were just wandering. And then I would soon know that many folks were experiencing mental health issues. A lot of moms, before I even knew what human trafficking was, I
Mm.
was seeing women with their children fleeing these terrible situations. We just started an outreach on a Thursday night. I had 3 bags of clothes, a coffee pot, and a crock pot. A friend helped me set up, and then we opened up on a Thursday night and we just let people come in. And we were seeing maybe about 20 people on a night, on a Thursday night. And then eventually it grew. So we asked if we could use the church an additional day. And I said, yeah, why don't you just take a Saturday? And so we did. And we started to open the doors at 8 a.m. And Michelle, before you know it, we were seeing over 300 people on a Saturday, every week. And then as the word got out about the work that we were doing, other agencies began to support us. And this is where I learned the beauty of partnerships and relationships and collaboration, because that is our superpower here at Providence Family Life Center and the lab, is that when we work with other partners, they have a piece, we have a piece. Let's bring it all together to better serve our community. But that is how we got started. It's just simply understanding in the community the needs of people. Like I was really listening. I was listening with my heart. So I was seeing, but I was listening with my heart. And I knew there was something bigger in me that would allow me to be a part of the solution for our community. From 2008 to today, even though we have the lab, we are still in that outreach mindset, which says that our doors are open for people to come in and inquire. It might be about housing, even though the sign outside says yoga, people are still compelled to come in and we help them. We will direct them to wherever they need to go. The outreach started in 2008 and it just progressed to, I see these individuals who are homeless and struggling with undiagnosed mental illness. And at the time, I didn't have the education, but I knew what I knew and didn't know what I didn't know.
Mhm.
And we were able to help them after we understood, why are you homeless? What is going on? The mental illness was a big contributor to homelessness. And then not having health care was also a contributor. And so we were able to work with disabilities back in Michigan. We started doing that work and it just carried on and we relocated here.
Can you share a story with us that illustrates the impact you're having of serving people with undiagnosed mental illness or co-occurring disorders? Can you share of someone who's really been impacted by your work?
Sure. Back in Michigan, we met a gentleman who he had changed his name 6 times. When we met him, his name was Hollywood General Motors. And he was he was severely mentally ill. He had a diagnosis of schizophrenia at the time, and he came into our outreach and he started to come on a regular basis. And eventually we would help him, or first we would understand his story. because some people don't want help. They just want you to listen, and that's okay too. And that's one of the guiding principles of social work is the right to self-determination. So if a person comes to you and they're expressing distress, you listen, you offer information. If the person chooses to follow up with what you're recommending, then that is their choice. But it is not our choice to make those decisions for the individual. This gentleman, he started to come. He eventually said, "Hey, I need some help." We learned that he had been kicked out of, or actually, he was taken into group homes. He was beaten. He was kicked out every morning at 6 a.m. He had his benefits taken from him, and then he was not being cared for properly. So what we did was we advocated for him with the Social Security Administration, helped him get his benefits and all those things back in place. But we also knew that there was severe mental illness that needed to be addressed. And there, after a few hospitalizations, he actually was appointed a guardian back in Michigan. And the courts said, okay, we're going to appoint a public guardian for you. And at the time, I was still working with this gentleman because he didn't have any family. He, as he became stabilized, because I helped him get connected to physicians, get counseling, get stabilized in first a hotel, and then we worked on housing for him, got him an apartment. And mind you, Michelle, this is a gentleman who was homeless for 26 years, and he came in contact with something different at Providence. And I will say that he went to the court himself with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. He petitioned the court himself for his own guardian. He had selected me to be his guardian. The judge at the court called me up and said, "Hey, we have a gentleman here who is petitioning for you to be his guardian." And I said politely to the judge, "No, thanks. I have no skills in this area. I am a social worker. I am not a guardian." And she says, "We will teach you. He is demanding that you become his guardian." I said, "Okay, as long as there's education." I became this gentleman's guardian in 2012. He has worked for 6 years, and he actually just authored his own book, a new book, and then he's actually working on a second book. But here's the piece that I want to share with people who are listening. Research is so important in the work. If you are in community work, research, because in the research regarding the diagnosis of schizophrenia, you will understand the concepts, the irrational beliefs, the behaviors, and then you really can learn from the data. The data, it's informed us that people living with that diagnosis need a sense of community, a sense of family, a sense of belonging, because in their minds, it's the world against them. And so I took that data, I took it to heart, and I turned it into a practical plan for this gentleman. And that is what has helped him maintain and sustain his life and his role in the community. And so it wasn't all about medication. It
Mm.
was all about just being available for an individual. And then guess what happened?
What happened?
Last year, we got a call from a old attorney that had been appointed to the family. He came in contact with his sister he hadn't spoken to since 1979.
Mhm.
So this Christmas, he actually
Wow.
spent Christmas with his family and was able to create new memories. And his life, when you look at a life transform, Providence Family Life Center, our motto is lives change. He is the epitome of the work that we do. And I'm
That's
getting a little
awesome.
emotional here because it's just the perfect
Yeah.
story of connecting the mind, the body, understanding, and then taking your heart, putting your heart right in the center of that to really understand what the needs are of this individual. And
Yeah.
that's what we do at the lab.
That's such a touching and beautiful story. I wonder, as you talk about your journey, given your kind of heart and soul into this work, wonder financially, how is it able to work? Are there grants and federal funding involved? But how are you able to financially sustain everything that you're doing?
And I'm glad you asked that question because my husband and I are really philanthropists. A lot of this work that we do, we give of our own to do this work. In the past, we have been recipients of federal grants, but those grants are really challenging to manage. There's a lot of administrative aspects of those grants, which really take away from the work that you're trying to do. And we have a couple of private donors, but we're looking at alternative ways and sources to generate dollars. So looking for partnerships and collaborations, and then also potentially linking with a university to do some research on some of the data that we've collected over the last year. Because we do have a study that we've actually developed. We haven't put the case study together to publish it yet, but we have the data that shows that people coming to the lab on a regular basis over a 30-day period showed a immediate decrease in symptoms like anxiety, stress, and insomnia, and then actually created the motivation to help individuals within themselves, understanding the stages of change, helping them develop the motivation to want to do more for themselves in the area of healthcare. So again, we are looking at funding opportunities right now, and anyone out there listening who might be interested in supporting our work, we'd love to sit down and have a conversation with you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's time for us to wrap up, but I wanted to ask you one more thing about your personal journey. As a woman who, during all this time, you mentioned your education, and when you went back, you were certainly at midlife getting your doctorate. What did that feel like being where we are in life and going back into that type of formal education? What fears did you have? What did that feel like?
Wow. So when you talk about education, it was different for me for sure because I was a career changer. My kids were already married. I was grandma as well. But I had this awakening. It was almost like that peace that I was actually experiencing was
Mhm.
what was missing. But I needed to have those other experiences first in order to truly appreciate it. And here's the other thing about that experience. So I went back, essentially started over, got my associates, got my BSW in social work. And then they were saying, "Oh, Antoinette, you need to keep going, keep going." And then I thought, okay, so I'm in it to win and I'm old. So guess what? If I'm going to go, to get my master's, I want to go to one of the best schools. And so my husband went with me and he was like, okay, so you need to go and explore the University of Michigan. And I was just like, are you kidding me? That's a dream. I'll never get into Michigan because they have wait lists for years. And then I'm old. Well, they required this essay. I wrote an essay and Dan helped me review it to make sure that it was crispy from a grammatical perspective, and I got selected. I'll never forget coming home,
Awesome.
and I found this welcome package from the University of Michigan on my doorstep, and I was just, like, floored. And to be a non-traditional student attending one of the top research universities in the world was really like, I felt so hand selected, like the universe hand selected me for such a time as this, knowing that the education that I was going to get at that time was going to be that next step, that catalyst to jump off into this next realm and into this work that I'm doing now. And as you would have it, the laboratory, the Mind Body Movement Living Laboratory, is a research intervention as well. We're collecting data. Every time a person walks into the door, we sit down and we listen. We are learning from people. People are teaching us what they need. And I think we need more of that. The other piece that I learned really quickly was that right. When we think about the future of health and wellness, and we like to use the term well-being here because well-being is a process, a continuous state. What we really believe here is that as resources become more limited and AI is really redefining the game in terms of all sectors, as healthcare practitioners, health, mental health, alternative health, we need to come together. These curriculums in these schools have to be redone. They have to have more of an integrated model that shows the whole person, not just the disease model, you're sick, take a pill, of which we're not looking at root causes. We need to be able to teach people about how the body can heal. We really need to help people understand how to ask questions about their own bodies, really exploring nutrition. So in these new intake assessments, we really need to encompass all disciplines to really truly get at the cures.
Forward looking, where do you hope the field of trauma recovery will be in 10 years? Where do you hope to see it?
Well, yeah, so what I see though is more community-based models. I know there's some interventions right now that the government and some other entities are testing, and I love that. I think that's so cool. But I'll never forget, I'll go back to a time at the University of Michigan. One of my policy professors said, because I asked about prevention, there's no money in prevention. You'll never ever get money from prevention. I'm thinking, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. But again, prevention to me is about education, educating our younger generations, because we have to look at the kids that are going to be in our workforces and those kids who are also going to be purchasers of managed care services or insurances and all of those things. And we have to look at the drain on our healthcare systems. And the data is telling us now that we're at a shortage of healthcare workers in the community. And that's one of the things that is so important, because if we teach people, we give people a sense of agency that says, okay, first of all, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Okay, that's number
Mhm.
one. But really understand your bodies and then give them the tools to go and ask those healthcare professionals those questions. And then healthcare professionals have to be willing to understand the right to self-determination, that a person can take the information that they're hearing and then go test it for themselves, get more information to support what it is that they need to live their best lives. So what I see in the future is that more integration, more disciplines within these large schools coming together to work together. I see more of the alternative and holistic community-based approaches, because right now we see all of these acupuncturists and energy workers and Reiki people, and all of this is scattered. And the idea is, let's meet with the MDs. Let's meet with those traditional medical doctors. Let's bring chiropractors and energy healers together with your traditional primary care. Let's bring this all together and let's have these conversations, managed care too, and let's continue to have the conversation as it relates to how can we help the individual understand healing and how to
Yes.
truly care for themselves.
I love that. And I would love to see that as well. Wonderful stuff. Thank you so much, Dr. Antoinette, for joining us. You're amazing. If anyone in our audience would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. They can go to our website at www.m as in Mary, B as in boy, M as in Mary, LL.live. Or they can give us a call at 239-676-3159. And then also, we're on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and LinkedIn at Providence Family Life Center.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I love all the work you're doing, and I just wish you continued success into the future, and for you personally too, as you continue to recreate your life and to be the person that you want to be today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining me today on Her Comeback. I hope this conversation inspired you to keep moving forward no matter where you are in your own journey. If you love this episode, I'd be so grateful if you would subscribe to the show on my YouTube channel at Michelle Thompson Life Coaching. Go there for more encouragement, insights, and just real talk about making a comeback happen. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss new content. You can also visit hercomebackpodcast.com for notes, resources, connect with me, connect with other women and our amazing community who are rewriting their stories. Remember, your setback isn't your final chapter. It's just the setup for your greatest comeback yet. I'll see you next time. Until then.